BS out. He calls out bad storylines, and this is where he called out you and I, represented by this man here at the pool, Joe Average. He called him out. Look at what it says beginning with verse 5. And a certain man was there which had had an infirmity 38 years. So Jesus is in no rush because he transcends time. You've heard me say a day in God's eyes is like 1,000 years, and to God 1,000 years is like a day. And when you take that and you modify that to our time scale, you translate it like you translate meters to inches, that works out to about, give or take, 3 hours as it pertains to what God promised us in the way of life. Because he promised every individual 70, which is 70 years. That's why I'm so thankful to come and be with you, because that lets me know that there's hope for me to get beyond what's been promised. So if you look at 70 as 70 years, and you look at God's economy of scale, 70 years in God's economy of scale is only about 3 hours old. And we've had this discussion. A baby that's only 3 hours old can only do so much. Can only cry, poop, and raise his hands. That's about it. So we look here, and we see this individual basically doing what he can do and what he normally does within the parameters of what Jesus is saying. It says here, a certain man was there, had been there 38 years, which to God was like a few instances. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had been there a long time, in that case, Jesus not only knew that he had been there, but he also knew the condition he was in. He also knew that he was in a condition like I was last night. That he was watching, he saw, he make an effort, somebody get in the water first. He saw, he make an effort, somebody get in the water first. So he saw the angel trouble in the water. He didn't even try to make an effort this time, because like me, he turned away. But Jesus brought his focus back by calling out that bad storyline. He snapped him back to attention by helping him to see, hey, don't focus on what you see right here now. Answer me this question. Jesus asked him in verse 6, do you want to be made whole? Is it your will to be made whole? That question is critical because it comes down to a matter of will. Because when it stops being about one's skill and starts being about one's will takes you into arenas that you know you're not equipped to be in. But you know, because of who you know, you can stand in the face of that arena. When I started school a year and a half ago, I had all kinds of personal demons I was fighting. Had struggles with completing stuff that I started. Had struggles with wanting to fold up my tent and go home when it got too rough. Had struggles with understanding that adversity makes you stronger. And it takes you to new levels. But when I got to those points, what I had to do was not focus on the storyline. I remember one time I fell asleep in doing an assignment because I thought I'm never going to finish it. And the enemy's like, that's right, you're never going to finish it. Come on here, just go to sleep. And I woke up the next day, and well, I say the next day, it was like maybe 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, and realized I hadn't turned the assignment in. And the devil's like, don't even bother. What's the point? Just pack up your stuff and go home. And I'm like, and I literally audibly had to say, no, devil, I'm not doing that. I've come too far to not finish. So I typed my teacher a message and I let him know, I apologize. I fell asleep. There were glitches that had things slowed down here. And quite honestly, I wanted to give up. But I'm asking if you would to please accept this, and I'm willing to take whatever grade that you give me. And to show you how God works, when his will and skill is taken out of the picture, God's grace comes in. That's where I learned that morning that God's grace is sufficient. The professor emailed me back and he said, Derek, don't worry about it. I appreciate your honesty. Because of your honesty, not only am I going to accept, this assignment, because the policy is if it's late, it don't get accepted. And you get a 0 on it. Not only am I going to accept the assignment, but I'm going to give you full grade for it. I'm not going to even mark it down. So I wound up getting an A on something that I should have got a 0 on. Why? Because of will, not skill. When it's will, you can go into a situation that you know you're going to fail. And God will give you what you need, the grace, for it to not only be sufficient, but for it to be more than enough. He asked this man, will you be made whole? Is it your will to be made whole? The man went on to say, well, sir, I have no man when the water's trouble to put me into the pool, but while I'm on my way, somebody else steps in. This is where Jesus stepped in like the man in the introduction. I call BS on that. No. Don't believe that bad storyline. Don't believe that bad storyline. That's what Jesus saying to us. Don't believe that bad storyline. Don't believe you're not worthy to talk to somebody because you messed up here. Don't believe that bad storyline. You can't talk to somebody about faith because you missed it on so many times. Don't believe that bad storyline. You can't talk to somebody about healing because the doctor says you're this and that. Don't believe it because it doesn't matter what the doctor says. What the word says in Philippians 4:13 is that I can do all things through Christ. This strengthens me. Because it's not what you know, church. It's who you know. And it's not only in who you know, but it's understanding that the one that we know can do everything but fail. And if we know that God can do everything but fail, and we can do all things through Christ which strengthens us, be bold and take that risk. Move outside of your skill set. Move outside of what you feel you can do. And move into what you know God can do. Because God can do all things except fail. And when we start walking by faith at that level, and when we start walking by faith in that degree, we'll begin to see people's hearts and lives changed. You can do like I did. There's a picture that I took last Saturday. And because there they had you like all the different props and stuff, and when I checked in, they check you in with your name, and when they check you in with your name, they give you, whatever regalia you have coming your way. And I had my robe and everything, which was a blessing in and of itself to put on. But I worked very, very hard, which is taking us now to our last point. I worked very, very hard to, become a part of this particular honor society, because that's one thing I never did in high school. That's one thing I never did in my undergraduate studies. And that's be a member of an honor society. Be one that worked hard enough to have a GPA high enough where you could be viewed as one to graduate with honors. And I was worried. I didn't know if I made it. But when they checked me in, they're like, Mr. Thomas, congratulations. Here's your card, which was the card I needed for the next day to graduate. And here are your honors. And they gave me my little cords to put around my neck, And that made me feel good, because that let me know, what, God? Will overcame skill. And they said, would you like to take a picture to kind of capture this moment? And, my fiance was like, go take a picture. Go grab a sign and take a picture. They had all these signs, different signs you can hold up. And I found this one particular sign that summed it up for me perfectly. And I put my honors cords around my neck, and I didn't have my robe on that day because it was just casual pictures. Put the honors cords around my neck, and I grabbed the little graduation hat that they had for you to take in the props. And the sign I grabbed said the tassel was worth the hassle. That's what the sign said. And that leads me to my last point. The tassel is indeed always worth the hassle. The reward is worth the struggle, because the last BS that we're talking about is what Christ does. We got to know, lastly, that Christ comes to bring us salvation. That's that last BS. Amen. He comes to bring us salvation. We got to understand that everything we go through is worth it, because God is making a delivery through his son Jesus to us where we are to bring us salvation. We got to understand that we got to understand that no matter what the current chapter of our story looks like, in the end we ultimately win. And because we ultimately win, we've got to shun the world's way of thinking. The world looks at our situation and assumes our future, kind of like I did with the baseball game. While the Lord meets us in our situation and secures our future for eternity. Amen. Jesus sees where we are. Jesus, like the songwriter wrote, Jesus knows all about our struggles. He knows. He already knows. He knows where we're going to trip up, when we're going to trip up, what time we're going to trip up, how many times we're going to roll around in it, what we're going to say, what we're going to think. He knows all this stuff. He knows it all. Jesus is truly a know-it-all. But in spite of him knowing it all about us, in spite of him knowing our shortcomings, in spite of him knowing areas where we're just going to not only miss it, but just not even try, in spite of him understanding that there are going to be times where he's going to love us when we're truly unlovable, he steps into our situations anyway, because he has an agenda. And when a person has an understanding of who they are, and they walk in the confidence that Christ walked